So, My Hero Academia manga chapter 325 has been translated, and let's just say this may be the end of the Class 1A trying to convince the civilians to let Deku in, and we'll see why that may be the case right after this intro. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, here to talk to you and review My Hero Academia manga chapter 325 titled Connected to One for All. So, when it comes to this chapter of My Hero Academia, it's as the title says, we get a better understanding of how everyone here is connected to one for all. Not just Class 1A, not just the civilians, not just Deku, but everyone. And pretty much what we get in this chapter is the final confirmation that the civilians are allowing Deku to come and at least stay at UA and rest. And we get to see where the final convincing of the entire as they call it, audience comes from. And we'll get a little bit more into that in the review proper. But before we go right into the review, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like to see me review My Hero Academia. I do discussions and spoilers as well, so if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And without the way, let's get right into the review. So, the chapter actually starts off a moment before the end of the last chapter, where we do get to see Koda as well as the Weasel giant woman come to Deku's side. We get a small glimpse of what happens before that, and right before that happens, we get the confirmation that Mineta tries to run towards Deku's side because it's the moment that Deku falls and hits the ground, and he's worried about him, but Ida's like, no, Mineta, it's alright. It's not our place to jump in right now. Am I right, Uraraka-san? In reference to the heroes, Class 1A, Uraraka, they've done their job, and now it's up for the second part, the civilians, to actually make their part known. As we cut over to what we see as more of the present time, where we have Kota and the giant woman actually at Deku's side, where we get the title of the chapter dropped. And pretty much from this moment up until the next person talking, we have Kota who's basically announcing like how much he cares about Deku, as he calls him Big Bro Midoriya, or like most likely Ni-chan or Ni-san in the actual Japanese translation. But Kota is being very sincere when he's like crying, and he's like he doesn't want to see Deku cry, and that he's sorry that he couldn't jump in sooner, but because he's here now that Deku doesn't have to cry, as we once again see Deku crying even more because obviously the kid that he saves looks up to him and is crying and is there for him. And this is very interesting, and it gets even more interesting as we have this Weasel girl who's explaining like, oh, you're the student from UA, you saved me, and it's because of you that I'm here and I was able to see you again because I was rejected from all of the other facilities because I was a mutant like Quirk, so I really want to thank you, Crybaby Hiro-san. And there are two layers to what she just said that I want to go into. The first is the fact that she was rejected from other shelters because she has a mutant like Quirk. Once again, Horikoshi brings in more racism into My Hero Academia because, of course, because that's just what humans do. They discriminate against people by how they look and not by their actions. But then this ties into the second part is that, but even with that, this ties into the second part for why she's here is because even though she was rejected from all of the places, that because of what Deku did and because she was let in at UA, she was able to meet the person that saved her. Because if you remember correctly, she didn't really get a good look at his face since, you know, it was all covered and no one actually knew who he was. But even so, she was very thankful for the fact that he saved her, and because of what he did, she was able to meet him again. So it just shows that Deku has built these connections, a bigger and stronger connection with Kota, but even the smaller connection with this Weasel girl was still very impactful in both of their lives. And that eventually leads them to trying to hug Deku and make him feel alright, as we have a familiar face in the crowd coming up to basically tell everyone to just let the kids stay here. We need to stop being an audience or bystanders in all of this. And what is great about this moment is that the character who's pretty much saying that is literally the first character in the series to talk to Deku. It's the guy with the multiple stars and the multiple shurikens on both sides of his head. Yeah, it's that guy from chapter 1. And this is so great because it's tying back into Deku's story about how he becomes the greatest hero, and how this one character tells everyone that, yeah, he doesn't want to stay here for long. He just wants to rest here. And we as the civilians are kind of to blame for this, because all we've been doing is looking the heroes as an audience, and we've been cheering them on, but we've never been putting our soul into it because of how great and unparalleled All Might was as a hero, and that's on us. And how, because of everything that has happened, and when the stage got swept away, the heroes who were only doing this for the money and the fame left, but what about the heroes that are still left? Why are they fighting? They're fighting for us, and if we reject them, then nothing's ever going to change, and we won't be able to go back to normal, so we need to stop being an audience. And this is great because it pretty much ties into the flaws that Hero Society has. The fact that they were so over-reliant on the heroes that they weren't able to do really anything themselves, which led to characters like Toga being created, like Shigaraki, especially with Shigaraki, because when Shigaraki was a kid, like, people looked at him as like, oh, a hero would definitely come to help him. Oh, a hero will definitely come and save this child. When in reality, someone should have took care of this kid, or at least anyone should have taken Shigaraki to the police station and say, hey, I found this lost kid. But no one did that. And that shows the flaws that Hero Society had, and it's pointed out here. It's not just that they were audiences, they were all bystanders. They saw everything going right and they stopped caring as much. And through that, when something horrible happened and they didn't really have faith in the heroes, only in All Might, it led to the situation that they're in right now. And that they were still blinded by the fact that even though these heroes still existed and they were still fighting for them even without pay, they were so blind to it up until this moment when they finally realized, oh, we should probably start stepping up. And you even have this one moment of someone's like, oh, well, yeah, he can rest, but like, why does he have to like rest here? Why can't he rest at Shiketsu? And someone brings up is that, but that's just putting the burden on them. And he's just like, oh. So like I said, it's just showing the flaws of Hero Society and how they're now coming around to, oh, we need to stop being an audience, stop being a bystander. We need to actually do something, even if it's like a tiny thing. And then you have the one guy who's literally been just instigating everything that is going on since Uraraka's speech. He even begins chiming in about how there was this hero that had multiple quirks, that was a decoy for the villains, that was called a true hero. And he comes to this realization that this may be this kid in front of him. So he just asks the question, if you stay here, will everything go back to normal? And then you have Deku, who responds with, yeah, because I'm not alone. I'll make sure everything gets back together, as he's saying this while he's crying. And we get to see the dude begin walking towards Deku, and it cuts back to Endeavor, Shoto, and Hawks, as Ectoplasm just comes out and is like, did you hear her speech? Yeah, you should probably see what's going on in there. It's best for you to see it. As they begin walking in and they see the situation in hand, and what they see, I'll get to a little bit later, but what they see begins to show Endeavor, and that what he may have done to Deku wasn't just like protecting everyone, but that all he was doing was pushing the burden onto Deku, and how he believes that progress wasn't made. But then Hawks chimes in and is like, oh, if you're talking about progress, yeah, we've made one step forward, because he begins to explain how that step was being made, because right there in UA, that when it came to One for All, and this specific term is very interesting because it's a term that has been used before, and that is the crystallization of people's hearts joining together as one, or is something that has described a One for All, as we have Hawks making the connections from All Might, who connected to Midoriya, who connected to Class 1A, including Uraraka, who connected with the civilians, that led to the moment that they're in right now. Because through all of those connections, the people were finally reached, and if everyone at this moment is even thinking about someone other than themselves just for a little moment, then this is the first step needed for a society where heroes have enough time to laugh and come together and have as much free time as they possibly can, as we get a double page spread of all of the civilians coming to the aid of the heroes. coming to give them umbrellas, coming to like make sure that everything is okay. Specifically with Deku, since he's the one that's crying. But what is even more impactful, and something that I didn't bring up, is that Uraraka's speech didn't just affect the audience, it also affected Class 1A, because we saw Kota crying in a scene, and even in this big double page spread, on the side, we see Kirishima also crying and being thankful that someone's just giving him an umbrella, as well as just a funny scene of Kaminari just slapping Bakugo in the back of the head, because we all know that Bakugo is going to say something stupid and say something insensitive, because that's just what Bakugo is. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And this sort of kind of ends the small mini arc that we were in, which was trying to convince the civilians to at least Deku stay at UA for a little while, and they succeed. And it's not solely due to Aravity. It's not solely due to Kota. It's not solely due to like that one civilian. It was the accumulation of all of this. And if all of it didn't go well, then this scene most likely would not have happened. And that's just amazing to show that within the few pages, we were able to see the gradual change of all of these civilians finally turning to the side of the heroes, and that's just great to see. So we cut back over to Shoto and Endeavor, where Shoto tells his father that, yeah, we're still doing this together, right? As we get to see Dabi's face as they're like, yeah. As we cut over to Nezu, where we get the final few pages of this chapter focused on Nezu's conversation with a returning character of Eraserhead, Aizawa-kun, as apparently Nezu has at the very least been on a call with Aizawa the entire time, so Aizawa most likely heard what Uraraka and what everyone said. Or Nezu told Aizawa that, yeah, your students did very well, as Aizawa tells Nezu to, oh yeah, give the class rep a well done, as we are now focusing on this conversation between Nezu and Aizawa. And pretty much what this conversation is about two or three things. One, it's about Kurogiri. The second thing is about what they're dealing to make sure that Toga doesn't infiltrate the Hero Society. For starters, apparently Kurogiri was moved from Tartarus to Central Hospital, which pretty much explains why we didn't see him during the breakout of Tartarus, which, you know, makes a whole lot of sense. Because in the off chance that, you know, All For One, I don't know, breaks into Tartarus and frees all the villains, you wouldn't want Kurogiri to be there, because as they literally say in this chapter, oh, if it wasn't for the fact that we moved him to Central Hospital, as well as Mirko destroying his warping quirk copy, yeah, no stronghold would have been safe. So yeah, it was actually a good thing that they were able to get that information, because it led to Kurogiri being moved somewhere else, where they also get the explanation that they aren't able to like really get him to respond anymore, but that doesn't really matter, because the first response and the fact that Shirokuma was even to reappear for a moment pretty much set this path into motion, and that without that, none of this actually would have occurred. So it's great to see that even though Kurogiri is really a non-character right now, that he is still playing a role in the story and has shaped the story and shaped the path that we are walking, and without him, everything probably would have been just messed up. So then we cut over to an explanation for how they were able to make sure that Toga doesn't infiltrate any of the facilities, or at least UA, by having civilians who want to come in stay isolated, or probably best way to say it, quarantined for any certain amount of time, because they are able to figure out how much blood she needs to consume to transform into a person and how long that would take. So that's kind of weird how they know that. But I mean, you could say it's quirk science, and that UA is like well known about like understanding how quirks work. So, you know, that's not really that important. But then we get to the final part of all of this, after they've explained like how Toga most likely is most definitely not at UA, wink wink, she's most likely going to be there eventually. Aizawa says that UA is now a stronghold and it's time for revenge. As we cut over to the final panel of this chapter, where we see All Might facing away from the UA barrier and proceed to be walking away from it. And that may most likely be the case, because he probably heard that man's conversation and is thinking to himself, oh, this is all my fault. I probably shouldn't return, because that would just make things a lot worse. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of this chapter, and there's a few implications about this, specifically with the All Might turning away from the UA barrier, because he most likely heard Uraraka's speech. He most likely heard the speech of like the people that are inside the wall, and even if he didn't, there's also possibly the implication that this may not be All Might, that this could be Toga, who the last time we saw All Might with us was with Stain, and the last time we saw Stain, he was out of prison, and we know that Toga looks up to Stain, so there's that implication as well, but I think that may be less likely, but it's still going to be in the back of my head. But I think most likely what is happening at the end of the chapter is that All Might hears or heard the yellings and the conversations, and he finally thinks to himself like, oh, the reason why we are in this state is all because of me. I do not think that I deserve to return to UA, and he's going to leave, which will hopefully eventually lead to all of Class A going out and searching for All Might, which could lead to the end of the series where they have to face off against the villains, and then it's impromptu, and then they have to fight, and my theory that when All Might dies, or he'll be a sacrificial pawn so that Deku could obtain the full power of One for All so that he can defeat Shigaraki. That's potentially what is being set up here. But besides that, yeah, we pretty much get to see that the civilians are finally convinced to allow Deku to stay at UA, and that now they're giving their full support. Now the civilians are no longer the audience, no longer just bystanders, but now they are taking actual steps to actually help the heroes, even if it's in a small way, because those small steps eventually build up. If one person can take a small step to help the hero, that may not mean a lot. But if multiple people take that small step forward, that will be a lot more helpful, and we see that's what is happening in this chapter. As well as we get the reconfirmation that both Shoto and Endeavor are eventually going to fight Dabi. As well as we are able to see Kota, as well as the Wegozo girl, fully and officially thank Deku for everything that he has done for them. So yeah, it wasn't as bombastic or as amazing as the past few chapters, but it was still a very good chapter. And most likely from here on out, we're going to get most likely a little bit of downside. We're probably going to see Deku begin to heal. We're going to see him having conversations with Class 1A, which is going to be very interesting to see what they talk about. Most likely, we hopefully will get more information about how Deku has been able to use his quirks, as well as One for All. So they may be led into the loop a little bit more. He may even tell them that, hey, I can hear voices in my head, and they will probably just agree with it. So most likely, we're going to see Deku beginning to rest and get a little bit more detail into that, and then eventually cut over to what is happening with All Might and why he may be leaving UA. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this review for My Hero Academia. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed this chapter. Did you think that you really enjoyed this small mini arc of just seeing the civilians be convinced? Do you think that it was necessary? Do you think that it was unnecessary? Do you think that it was good? Do you think that it was bad? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below, as well as leave a like on this video if you liked it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like My Hero Academia content, and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!